Hey everybody, John the Other here, obviously. And our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau apparently cannot imagine the grief and sorrow that the Boushie family is feeling, those are his words, after their son was fatally shot by a farmer who the 22-year-old Colton Boushie had been attempting to rob. On Friday, February 9th, the farmer, Gerald Stanley, was acquitted of second-degree murder. In 2016, he had been fixing a fence on his property when a grey SUV carrying Colton Boushie and his friends entered the farmer's yard. The vehicle was missing a tire by the time it entered the Stanley farm. Boushie and his companions had stopped at another farm earlier in the day where Colton Boushie had attempted, without success, to steal another vehicle because they had damaged a tire driving over a culvert. The group of friends had started their day at the Red Pheasant First Nation Reserve. They had gone swimming, they had been drinking all day before suffering a flat tire, and attempted to use a .22 rifle to break a truck's window and steal it from another farm. They then drove to the home of Gerald Stanley, trying to steal from him an all-terrain vehicle, which alerted Mr. Stanley, who fired several shots from a handgun either at Mr. Boushie or into the air as a warning. It's not clear which. Colton Boushie and another man fled from the all-terrain vehicle back to their missing tire truck that they'd arrived in, and they immediately crashed it into a parked vehicle on the Stanley farm. The farmer, Gerald Stanley, saw that a lawnmower his wife had been using was now partially underneath the grey SUV, which led him to fear that his wife was pinned beneath the vehicle as well. So he ran to the truck, which had an engine still running, and he allegedly reached into the cab to turn off the engine, at which point his gun fired unexpectedly and accidentally, the bullet striking Colton Boushie in the head and killing him. That is the version of events according to Gerald Stanley, who has now been acquitted. According to a witness inside the SUV, Gerald Stanley leveled his pistol directly at the head of Colton Boushie and fired 2 shots, killing him. Now, the coroner's examination of the body showed only a single shot had struck Colton Boushie, throwing some doubt onto that witness account. But a firearms expert who had examined the handgun belonging to the farmer stated that the pistol showed no visible indication of mechanical failure, and this fact has been cited by a growing number of politicians and native tribal leaders in outrage-cultivating speeches demanding, quote, justice on behalf of the deceased 22-year-old Colton Boushie. Mr. Stanley's lawyer, that's the farmer, by contrast, argued that the gun had suffered a type of malfunction called a hang fire. This term refers to a bullet which, when it's struck by the actuating mechanism of the gun it's loaded into, does not fire normally but fires on a delay due to a partial or a delayed ignition within the bullet casing. Now, in support of this theory, a bullet casing was found inside the grey SUV matching the caliber of Mr. Stanley's handgun, and this casing was physically deformed, lending credibility to the argument suggesting a delayed or a malfunctioning shot, or, as they call it, a hang fire. It's likely, in my opinion, that for the jury this physical evidence was the basis for Mr. Stanley's acquittal. The deformed casing provides a reasonable doubt that he intentionally shot Colton Boushie. And this summary that I've just read to you is my best understanding of what actually occurred in the shooting death of the young Colton Boushie. But all of this is just background for the video that I want to make today and what I want to say. Here's the tweet, again, from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He says, "I can't imagine the grief and sorrow the Boushie family is feeling tonight, sending love to them from the US." And I have a problem with this, a big problem. I wonder if Mr. Trudeau understands the sorrow and the grief felt by the family of a man whose farm and home was intruded on by a truckload of armed, drunk, and violent 20-year-olds with intention to steal from him and, as far as he knew, kill members of his family. Gerald Stanley had not spent his day driving around armed and drunk in a partially wrecked vehicle as if he was cosplaying as a bandit from Mad Max with live ammo and actual attempts at motor vehicle theft. No. He was performing maintenance work at home on his farm when a carload of bandits invaded his property and tried to steal an ATV. I imagine for him and his family this was a traumatic experience, and the resulting fatal shooting was terrifying. Now, as much as the death of the young Mr. Boushie is a sad event, while we send our love and our sympathy to his family, there is an elephant in the room here that nobody is talking about. His family is who shaped him into the young man who ended his life by being killed by a farmer as he attempted, while drunk, to violently hijack a vehicle from that farmer's property after driving around with only 3 wheels after an earlier failed vehicle theft. Now, I don't want to heap injury on a family already experiencing tragedy, but you don't need to look at this kid's high school counselor's notes to see that his life was not on a productive path. And this doesn't just happen spontaneously without there being some connected dots. But we can't say that, can we? We have to be publicly respectful to a family whose values led to their 22-year-old son rampaging armed, drunkenly, across the countryside, stealing cars, and then eventually getting himself killed. That is the family's values that we are supposed to have public respect for. Well, how about this? No. So I will ask my question again. Why is my Prime Minister, the Prime Minister of my country, sticking his profoundly ignorant and incompetent nose into the outcome of a jury's decision in a Saskatchewan murder trial? No elected representative anywhere has any business participating in a criminal case in which that elected representative is not themselves a witness or a claimant. But it doesn't end with just the Prime Minister. Our Justice Minister, Jody Wilson-Raybould, whose job it is to make sure the courts perform their proper function, is also injecting her opinion into the decision of the jury in this case. Now, the basic questions which are properly examined in this case are whether an individual on his own property has the legal right to defend himself and his family from harm while a group of bandits is engaged in the commission of a crime against him. And secondarily, did this particular farmer exceed or go beyond what was reasonable for him to do in this situation of parties engaged in a violent robbery they were committing against him? These are the appropriate questions for the court. But Jody Wilson-Raybould, the Justice Minister, is injecting herself into the middle of this and making it into a question of racism. In fact, both Jody Wilson-Raybould and our current Prime Minister appear to be deliberately cultivating and deepening the divide between mainstream Canadian culture and Indigenous culture in the country. This is the Justice Minister's tweet in response to Trudeau's. She says, "Thank you, PM Justin Trudeau. My thoughts are with the family of Colton Boushie tonight. I truly feel your pain and I hear all your voices. As a country, we can and must do better. I am committed to working every day to ensure justice for all Canadians." That's her tweet. Now, I want to make what I say next as clear as I can make it. I do not care what ethnicity Colton Boushie or Gerald Stanley may each lay claim to. I also don't care about Gerald Stanley's guilt or innocence as decided by that jury, except that I care about the integrity of the court's standard and its process, because those two things are the basis for us having a safe, egalitarian, and civil society. The standard for acquittal in a criminal case is reasonable doubt. Now, if there are evidentiary reasons for a lack of reasonable doubt or an error of law, then I accept that an appeal on that verdict may be justified. But that is not what is going on here. Everybody making public statements of outrage and very ostentatious and phony postures of love for the family of this young bandit is trading on racism. And they are attempting to fuel and to deepen racial hatred and a race war between whites and natives in Canada, including the Prime Minister, including the Justice Minister, who said, "I feel your pain, I hear all your voices. As a country, we can and must do better." And she's talking about the decision of a jury. The federal Justice Minister is publicly repudiating the decision of a jury in a completed criminal trial. Jody Wilson-Raybould, the same woman whose proposed Bill C-51 will remove documentation of consent from a defendant's evidence in a criminal accusation of sexual assault, is again directly undermining the criminal justice system. And she must now either step down from her appointed position as Justice Minister or be fired by her boss, Justin. Race baiting and fomenting of hatred between different ethnic groups has no place in our country's highest offices, that of Justice Minister or Prime Minister of either Canada or any Western First World nation. Jody Wilson-Raybould is deliberately driving the Native community away from the mainstream of Canadian culture and using a broken family whose son is now dead as a political prop to drive that hatred. And I have equal scorn and contempt for every tribal leader and lesser political opportunist similarly wearing that boy's corpse as if it's a badge of phony virtue. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and have a lovely day.